Hi guys, welcome to Twin Peaks Twin Perspective. I'm Joe. And tonight I'm going to be talking about 10 things that I loved about Twin Peaks The Return. Twin Peaks Season 3. Full spoilers on everything Twin Peaks. That includes previous seasons as well as the books. I don't know where I'm going to wander off into, but I know I'm wandering among the pines. I wanted to give a shout out to Cameron from Obnoxious and Anonymous, who did a video like this, and I'd been planning on doing one, and I am dragging ass. I am late to the party. I'm very late to the party. I was late to the party in covering Twin Peaks at all. I didn't have a channel until Twin Peaks The Return started in 2017, and I was listening to podcasts and watching YouTube reactions and YouTube channels, and all in all, I would say I was up to close to 40 different outlets that I was listening to. Everything was Twin Peaks when Twin Peaks The Return was on. So I would watch the show as it was released, each hour, each part. And I would watch them probably 3 or 4 times in the first couple of nights. From the time it was released till the very next evening, probably 4 times, all of them. The first 4 parts I've seen probably 12 times, and the other parts anywhere from 5 to 8 times. So I did a rewatch recently, and that had me thinking I should do a top 10 things I loved and top 10 things I hated. Of course, I didn't hate much. Just some things drove me crazy, drove a lot of people crazy. It lost a lot of the original fan base early on, season 3. So I hung in there, enjoyed the week-to-week experience like nothing else I'd ever experienced on television. And that's an experience I'm never, ever going to forget. I don't know if I'll ever have that with another show, unless, of course, Mark Frost and David Lynch do a season 4. So Cameron did his top 10 things, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I'm going to mention a couple of things before I break into the 10. Some things that I really liked. The sound effects, I have to say, were brilliant. Some of the best sound effects I'd ever heard. The way they used the sound effects. A downfall of that was there was less music, and that's going to get into my other video, which I'll do after this one, talking about 10 things I did not love about the new season. But in its place was sound effects, and I have to say the sound effects were great. Shout out to Dean Hurley and, of course, David Lynch. I loved almost all of the new characters, especially guys like the Fuscos, who seemed to be brothers, but they were funny. They were a good mix of David Lynch and Mark Frost. I loved every scene that they had. I thought they were fun. I think that they were more involved in the central plot of what piqued my interest. Of course, nothing ever really got anywhere, but they were so close. They were so close until they realized this information could not be the Dougie Jones that they are looking at. He was in town. There's no way he escaped a federal prison. And in their opinion, there was no way he was an FBI agent. Oh, man, they were so close. I also wanted to mention Dr. Amp. Now, in the secret history of Twin Peaks, there was a big portion about Dr. Jacoby. And then in the final dossier, probably my favorite chapter is about Dr. Jacoby and his progression into Dr. Amp. Now, most people that were reviewing Twin Peaks The Return didn't really like Dr. Amp. I mean, I guess they liked him all right, but they were comparing him to Alex Jones, and I think the reason why is because he was talking about politics, he was really loud, and he presented an alternative narrative, I guess, from mainstream talk, which most people would just say is conspiracy theories. Well, there's a big difference between what Alex Jones does and what Dr. Amp does. Alex Jones is a psychopath, he's a moron, he pushes a bunch of crap, and what he talks about are legitimate conspiracy theories that really don't mean a fucking thing. And what Dr. Amp does is state facts about what's actually going on in the world, and he does it in a very animated and loud way, so don't get that shit twisted, alright? Dr. Amp is no Alex Jones. So I was late to the party. I didn't start covering Twin Peaks: The Return till after part 8. Like I said, I was probably frequenting 40 different sites, and every week the majority of those outlets would miss certain things that I thought were critical. For instance, when Richard Horne was introduced, no one uttered his name in the show. We didn't know that this guy's name was Richard until part 12, if you didn't read the credits. So we saw this badass dude causing problems from probably around, when was he introduced? Maybe part 5? I don't remember, but, like I said, no one mentioned his name. Of course, you read the credits at the end and it says Richard Horne, so huge revelation there in the credits. The majority of the 40 outlets I was listening to did not mention this guy's name when he was first introduced. I'm yelling at the TV or the computer or whichever one I'm watching the broadcast on. Did you not read the credits? This guy's a Horne. I'm thinking that this whole week of discussion is going to be about who this guy could possibly be, and instead, it went right over everybody's head. Now, a few good ones noticed. The ones that were on top of everything noticed, but for the most part, people didn't notice. They were getting a lot of things wrong. And admittedly, a lot of this stuff led to nothing anyway. So for me to want to focus on a certain thing when these channels didn't, ultimately it was just another discussion amongst all the discussions. So, I didn't stop listening to a lot of these outlets because of these mishaps. I mean, I had a few myself. I thought Diane was innocent the whole time. And if you follow the show like a real crime drama and you gather all the evidence, then it was pointing in the direction of her being innocent, texting to somebody else, Philip Jeffries, namely. And when it's revealed that she was actually texting with Mr. C the whole time, it made no sense to me. Okay. So anyway, by the time part 8 happened, I knew I had to talk about part 8 for sure. So my brother and I started Twin Perspective, and I started this channel, Rosenfield 10. And you can catch all of our reviews and recaps and thoughts we thought you didn't think of for parts 8 on. So I was late to the party, but I'm here now. And here are 10 things that I loved about Twin Peaks Season 3, otherwise known as The Return. Number 10, Big Ed and Norma. Now, Big Ed didn't join the cast until the last third of it, perhaps fourth of the series. He shows up and he only has a couple of scenes. I mean, we're talking maybe 4 scenes total. But Kurt McGill conveyed everything that needed to be conveyed in those scenes, and especially the way he dealt with Norma, burning that piece of paper back at the gas farm. Everyone knew this was probably a love letter he was going to slide to her, and poor Ed and Norma, man, they can never seem to get together. Well, Norma seemed to have her stuff together. Norma seemed to have moved on just fine. And it wasn't until Nadine shows up, inspired by Dr. Amp and carrying her golden shovel, that she finally lets Ed free to go and pursue who he's always loved, and Nadine knows he's always loved, Norma. And Ed goes to the Double R and he confesses to Norma that he's free now and he wants them to start the rest of their lives together. And when Norma excuses Ed to join her beau, her other beau, in a private conversation, Ed's distraught. He sits there with his eyes closed, like he's trying to wish it all away, or at least figure out how he's going to deal with this. And then Norma surprises everyone and gets rid of the other beau, and then approaches Ed, and Ed does a familiar thing, something he did in season 2. He proposes to Norma again, and she accepts. Except this time, it feels right. And maybe it feels right to me because of the power of Dr. Amp's message and the golden shovel, the power of Nadine's transformation. I believe in it this time. When Ned and Norma got close before, this was due to Nadine suffering from a coma and awakening thinking she's 18 years old. So this was different. She was cognitive. It seemed like Nadine wasn't living with Big Ed anymore in season 3. And we never saw them together, and then, I don't know, we never got any of that clarified, much like a lot of other stuff. But that scene with Ed and Norma in the Double R and Otis Redding playing I've Been Loving You for Too Long, for so long, that's some good stuff. I've never watched that scene without crying. I cried the first time I saw it, and I cry every time I see it. It's that powerful to me, and it's one of my favorite things about the whole show. So, now, I'm mentioning 10 things that I love about the show. They're not in an exact numerical order, but I do have my favorite things closer to the top of the list. So at number 9, I want to talk about Andy and Lucy. This was tough at first. Lucy seemed to be in another place mentally, emotionally. She seemed a little more distant, kind of separated from everybody else. The reaction she had to the cell phone, it just made me think that there was something a little off with Lucy, and that she was in, some sort of mental, emotional trouble. And it got me thinking perhaps, even her son wasn't her son. That photoshopped family picture didn't help matters. It seemed like, in my opinion, for a while, I thought that everyone around Lucy was presenting a certain life that, to help Lucy along, to try to help her to forget some tragedy or something. And my brother and I thought for a little while that maybe she had lost her child and all of this was a ruse. It was just hard for me to accept the way Lucy was acting at first. And Andy, I was proud of him. And they gave him the case where he had to go to the school and deal with the kid that OD'd, which is a far cry from Andy and the pilot of Twin Peaks when he couldn't see Laura's dead body without crying. And seemed like he broke down every time there was a death involved. And Andy was on the case in the return. So it seemed like Andy was good and strong. And eventually there was a scene with Andy and Lucy after Wally Brando showed up, which I love that scene. There was a scene where they were trying to pick a chair that they were going to put in their new study, which Wally so graciously gave to them. He gave up his bedroom so they could have their study. These fine people, his parents. And the scene where Lucy and Andy are trying to choose which chair, and Andy likes one, Lucy likes the other one. They insist that each of them wants, and they're getting up from their chairs and walking up to each other, even though they could talk to each other from where they're sitting. They insist on getting out of their chair, walking over to the other one and talking. And eventually, Andy concedes and says, "It's okay, Punky, you can get the chair you like." And then Lucy orders the chair that Andy likes. I thought it was about the sweetest thing in the world, and it made me feel better about where Andy and Lucy were at, that the characters were still good, and we were just having some weird stuff going on at first, but I loved that scene. I didn't think there was manipulation going on at all as far as reverse psychology or stuff like that. I thought it was so sweet. And then at the end, they both play such a huge part. Andy screws up the investigation with the trucker and the kid that got run over, it seems. But ultimately, in the end, he's the one that crosses over into the other place. White Lodge is what I'd like to refer to it as, even though people insist it's not the White Lodge. And the giant shows him everything, including some scenes from the future. And then Andy sets all this up in that last scene in the sheriff's station. So Lucy ends up shooting Mr. C, and then she can realizes after that how cell phones work. They play a big part. It's kind of weird. Lucy gets rid of Mr. C, and then Freddie gets rid of Bob. I wouldn't have been betting in Vegas on those odds of Lucy and this kid with the green glove being the heroes, but they were. So anyway, Andy and Lucy, ultimately, I love that we got to spend a lot of time with them. Now, during the week-to-week broadcast of The Return, it seemed like we weren't spending a lot of time in Twin Peaks. But when you go back with the rewatch and you can binge it in a certain way and you can actually knock a few hours out at a time, it does feel like we're in Twin Peaks a little more. It doesn't feel so separated. When you watch 1 hour and then you have to wait another week and you were only in Twin Peaks for about 20 minutes, it sucks. But then the next episode you might get 30 minutes. When you watch those 2 hours together, it's 50 minutes in Twin Peaks. It just feels different. It feels like you're actually there a lot more. So upon rewatch, that's how I felt. And I felt we were there more, and I felt like Andy and Lucy actually had a lot to do. I love Lucy's conversation with Deputy Chad when he's trying to distract her and she ends up just blowing his mind and busting his ass. So that was number 9. Number 8. Loved Mr. C. I did not want In my 25 years of waiting for a new Twin Peaks, I did not want this Cooper in the real world to be a doppelganger. I wanted it to be real Cooper who was just getting possessed by Bob from time to time. And instead we got the doppelganger. And you realize it's the doppelganger when he gets out that car and punches that dude in the face and knocks his ass out later and grabs Ray and Daria and takes off. This is a badass. He has a scene later where he's in complete control of all of these people, whether they want to do it or not. They're almost forced to. This guy that helps with the car, and then he kills him. Mr. C kills him, and then he kills Daria. This is after he killed William Hastings' wife. And this is a badass. We never get to watch Kyle MacLachlan play a part like this in those black contacts, and it all worked out great. Eventually, when Cooper exits and becomes Dougie, Mr. C has his car wreck and avoids throwing up until Dougie's taken, and then throws up all over the place. This toxic vomit that made the trooper sick. He ends up going to a federal prison, and the FBI shows up and interrogates him, and that's just one of the best scenes in the whole show. And then he manipulates the warden. He escapes. Ray gets the best of him, but he comes to again, and with the help of his real posse, Chantal and Hutch, the ones that not only do they don't seem like they're forced to do it, seems like they want to do it. Help Mr. C. They're gung ho about it and pretty damn good at it. So Mr. C gets back on track. The whole time he's looking for coordinates. He ends up getting 3 different sets of coordinates, or from 3 different people. 2 of them are the same, one of them's different. He goes to the 2 that are the same and ends up killing his kid, and then the one that's real gets him sent to the White Lodge, where he's trapped until they send him where they want him to go, which is the sheriff's station, where this elaborate plan has been set up to dispose of him via Lucy. A lot of people remember Mr. C in the arm wrestling match where he takes out Jason. Derek, I can't remember his name. Yeah, beats him and breaks his face, and then kills Ray after he gets all the information. Mr. C was a badass. I loved him. I loved that we got to see Kyle play a part like that. And really the only problem I have with him through the whole thing is how he's disposed of in the end. I would have liked to have seen a different kind of confrontation, one between Mr. C and Coop. But you go, Lucy. You go, girl. All right, number 7. As far as Twin Peaks characters go, and as far as the growth of them and where they're at now, and I've been mentioning a lot of them, Dr. Ramp and Big Ed and Norman and in Lucy, I love where Bobby ended up. So number 7 here, I'm talking about Bobby. Bobby wasn't a favorite character of mine in the first 2 seasons. There was this attempt for him to try to grow up when he started working for Ben Horne. And ultimately, though, I never thought he was good for Shelley. So I think Shelley deserved a man, and Bobby hadn't really grown up enough. So start with The Return, season 3. And Bobby's actually followed in his father's footsteps of service, law enforcement. His father was in the Air Force, and here's Bobby, Twin Peaks deputy. Wow. And Bobby had a bunch of scenes where he was the adult, the obvious adult in the situation, the one that had it all together. When the double R gets the gunshot and Bobby has to go out and take care of the whole situation in the middle of the street, you know, that was his moment. But he also seemed to keep things together with Shelley and Becky after Becky's ordeal with her and her damn gun. And because Bobby has followed this decent, moral, mature path, his father's plans that were laid out, you know, fell into place perfectly, where Bobby ends up with the pivotal information that Mr. C had been looking for all along. Directions Bobby gets him from his dad, where to go, what to do. And yeah, I liked Bobby's progression a lot. He turned into a character that I really, really liked. And you know, I loved Major Briggs. And so this was good. This was a great evolution of a character from season 1 and season 2 up until 25 years later. Way to go, Lynch and Frost. Love what you did with Bobby. All right, number 6. Sarah Palmer. This was scary. I wanted good things for Sarah. She'd suffered so much. She loses her daughter. Then she loses her husband. Then she loses her soul. We see her in her house first, and seems like she's like a hermit of sorts. And when she's out in public at the grocery store, she can hardly handle the situation and has a huge episode where it's obvious she's still being touched by the devilish one. She's in a dark place. The way she turns Hawk away at her house later on seems like she's fighting between the two sides of her own personality, where she wants help and then just turns it away. And later on we see her wander to a bar, and we know then that there's something inside of her, and it's a killer. And Sarah, at this point, we realize needs to be saved. Ultimately, the way season 3 evolved into and ended, we're not sure. I'm not sure what happened with Sarah. The ending in itself is for another video. But overall, Grace Zabrisky's performance as Sarah Palmer and what they gave her to do and what she pulled off was great. I loved it. And I'm extremely intrigued and motivated for season 4, hugely due to what's going to happen with Sarah. I mean, the whole show was about, to me, Laura, Leland, and now we need to go and save Sarah. So, you know, I want to help Audrey. I want to save Audrey, and I also want to save Sarah. And that's two of the reasons why I want a season 4. I also would love to have some Cooper in my life, you know, for a change. All right. Speaking of Cooper, number 5 on my list. Pretty much Las Vegas, pardon me. Pretty much Las Vegas in general. But Dougie, specifically. This was tough. First couple episodes with Dougie, I found very amusing. Then after a couple episodes, I thought, okay, this is painful because we haven't gotten the transformation I wanted yet. About 4 episodes into Dougie, with Dougie, I decided, okay, I better enjoy this because this is the only Cooper we're going to get. And at that point, Janie E's character began to evolve. She quit bashing on Dougie so much. They gave her other people to muscle around, and suddenly she began to realize how beneficial it is to be around this Dougie guy, the new and improved Dougie. And she began to be a strong support for him and a strong ally, and that's what we needed. We needed foot soldiers for good in this show, and that's what Janie E became. And Sonny Jim was always a strong helper. He was always a foot soldier. I thought the Giant was in Sonny Jim for a while because of this, and because of how he helped his dad. It seemed to me like as though his father wouldn't have been normally acting like this, and that Sonny Jim immediately picked up on what needed to be done to help his Dougie along, his dad. So Janie E comes later as the true foot soldier for good. I also loved Battling Bud, Bushnell Mullins. I loved everything in Lucky 7 Insurance. When you first get there and you realize, you're hoping for Cooper to come back. And that first time around, it was tough. You get introduced to Sinclair and Bushnell and then the case file incident. So it was hard to swallow at first because you were going through this. I can't believe this is going to be a show about Dougie thing instead of Cooper thing. But after you accept it, you go back and watch it, you realize that, if you love Dougie, if you end up loving Dougie, you go back and you can enjoy those first few scenes more. It was all beautifully done. And I guess I was one of the lucky ones because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Dougie. So that's number 5. Number 4, probably the strength of the season to me was Albert and Cole, Albert Rosenfield and Gordon Cole. They get introduced the third episode, the end of the third episode, I think, or part, and into the fourth part, and they play a major role. This lack of going into the town of Twin Peaks and spending all this time in other cities, that was balanced off by the amount of Gordon and Albert, where that began to feel like old Twin Peaks, when really Albert was only there temporarily for a handful of episodes in the first 2 seasons, and Gordon was hardly there at all till right there toward the middle and the end, for just a few episodes, and that's it. It's such a memorable character, and of course Albert is probably my favorite character of the whole thing. I mean, everybody loves Cooper, but my namesake for my channel, Rosenfield 10, of course, ALBERT ROSENFIELD. Are we going to have to stand there all day, Curly? So there's Albert and Cole. Tammy. She was the girl I loved to hate. And then when I realized that Cole was being patient with her and he was teaching her and she was coming up, seemed like she was understanding and wrapping her head around it. They give her the position with Blue Rose and Task Force, and so eventually I warmed up to Tammy a bit. I knew I had to because she wrote the damn history and the final dossier, but But eventually, our FBI crew ends up in Buckhorn, where they get assistance from Constance and Mackley, Dave Mackley. And I love Constance, and I love that Albert and Constance hooked up because they belong together. They deserve each other. Constance was the new Albert. She was the Albert of Buckhorn. And it just seemed like they were just dragging ass when it came to the ring. And when they finally do tell the FBI about the ring and the inscription, they're more interested in interviewing Bill Hastings. They end up going to the Void. And then eventually we find out Diane is sisters with Janie E. But they never go to Las Vegas. The FBI ends up going straight to Twin Peaks. But overall, Cole and Albert, Constance and Mackley, that was some good stuff. Number 3 on my list, I would have to say, of all of the cats that were agents of evil following Mr. C, whether he wanted them to or not, whether they wanted to or not, my favorites were Chantal and Hutch. They were characters, and probably people likened them to Quentin Tarantino. Of course, Tim Roth and Jennifer Jason Leigh have appeared in Tarantino movies before, and I hate that they died, because these were two that I could have watched forever. Now, like I said, Mr. C was in control of a lot of people. Apparently Mr. C did this box in New York, so whoever had to keep this box a secret, and Sam being the one that watched the box, he probably didn't know who Mr. C was, but he was working for Mr. C ultimately. Sam and Tracy Sam. And Mr. Todd, of course, who seemed nervous about everything, but did everything that Mr. C wanted. And of course, Ray and Daria, who apparently were, Ray was undercover the whole time, but Daria didn't seem to mind. She was willing to do it, but these guys were willing. Chantal and Hutch, they were they weren't casual about it. They enjoyed it. It was hinted that Chantal liked to torture them before she killed them, and we never got to see that. It's one of them things. Vicious. Chantal's eating Cheetos the whole time. They always seem to be hungry. They have their husband and wife banter when they're together driving, talking about Mormons or talking about the stars, or how it sucked that their line of work was accepted if you worked for the government, but you couldn't freelance. I love those characters. I thought Chantal and Hutch were great. I thought that, in the realm of Twin Peaks, when I go back and look, you have the main villains, you have the main criminals, and then you have these other elements that exist, and you kind of hope that you show some interest in it. Everything that was going on at One-Eyed Jacks, and the Renault brothers and stuff like that. You kind of hope that there's a character there that makes it interesting when you go spend time with these people, even though it's kind of like most of the time off to the side as far as the plot goes. Chantal and Hutch were just interesting and fun, and they were efficient. They got their jobs done. They did a great job. So they just, Chantal, I guess, she was just pissed off she didn't have any more Cheetos. She got sloppy. But I love Chantal and Hutch. And the last two things I'm going to talk about. Number 2, Part 8. And Part 8 was a brilliant, epic thing. This is the reason why Twin Peaks Season 3 was nominated for 9 Emmys, because of Part 8. It was a beautiful thing. You know, you get the beginning, there's a long drive with Ray and Mr. C, and I thought the drive was a little bit too long. Just 30 seconds too long. Then the shock when Ray tricks Mr. C and shoots him. And then we go straight into the performance of the Nine Inch Nails, and we get the whole damn performance. And I heard the lyrics, and I realized how it connected to the story. But I still felt like we were wasting a little bit of time here to have the whole performance. They did that often in the the Roadhouse. But then the song ends, and Mr. C sits up, and you're like, holy shit. And then we get thrown back in time to this H-bomb blowing. And we fly into it, and it's just beautiful, wonderfully directed, creative explosions and stuff were inside the bomb, and we see the evil get spewed. And the only sequence I didn't really like in Part 8 was the gas station. I thought that it was cleverly done, and it was just probably twice as long as it needed to be, at least. I think we got the point of what was happening there. It would have been just a little less. But then we end up flying. We end up going into the purple area with the purple ocean, what I will refer to as the White Lodge. And the giant and Senorita Dido's there, and the alarm goes off. He ends up watching the movie, and then he floats and spews out the Laura ball, and all of this was just amazing. Then you get back to Earth, and it's several years later, I think 57, and then we have the rest of the episode, which is this classic black and white B-horror movie with this creature coming out of an egg and these woodsmen going around crushing skulls. And that segment right there may have been the best part of the whole episode to me. It was just so beautifully done and wonderfully acted, written. It was so simple and to the point, and I could watch a whole season of David Lynch doing a black and white B-horror movie. Just from seeing that. It was terrifying, it was gross, it was disturbing, on levels for a B-horror black and white 50s thing. I loved it. So overall, I think Part 8 stands on its own. It's something you can go back and watch all the time. David Lynch, with each movie that Lynch does, I view it as this is 2 hours of one of the greatest filmmakers ever, 2 hours of an effort from him, or in the case of Inland Empire, 4 hours. It's every time Lynch does something, I love it, I embrace it. It's like 2 hours of just awesomeness. I'm a huge fan. I can critique him, and I find flaws in all of it, but he's my favorite director, and I think he does so much stuff so well that everything he does, to me, is a beautiful thing. A masterpiece, parts of it are. So when you had an hour after hour after hour of 18 hours of David Lynch directed stuff, we're basically talking about 9 David Lynch movies. There's a lot of brilliance in there. Of course, it's spread out through so much. It's kind of hard to just find that 1 hour of perfection. And there are plenty of 1 hour parts in The Return that I would consider 10 out of 10. But from beginning to end, ultimately, Part 8, I'd have to say it was the best hour. Loved it. Loved it. It was completely different than the rest of it. But I'm so glad it was done. And now, number one, the last thing I'm going to mention, the Mitchum brothers. We're introduced to the Mitchum brothers, and they're pissed off because somebody won a bunch of money. They kick the pit boss's ass, tell him to leave town, never come back. And you're thinking, these guys are pretty tough. Might even be some Mr. Eddie shit going on around here, you know. There's a lot of Tarantino stuff going on, you know, but these guys felt more like a Scorsese group, you know. They're going to be the fucking Las Vegas mob, and they're talking about canceling hits later on. But they have these 3 girls with them, and although they seem like aesthetic and just there to accompany these bullies, who you know, you never know how they treat the girls. There's a focus there for a while on how they treat the girls, particularly Candy, and there's a patience exhibited, even though it's hard for them, and we laugh at how angry they get. There's a patience that's exhibited, and I'm a fan of Jim Belushi as an actor. I think he's a character. I think that he serves a purpose when he plays a role. He does it. You know, the very first thing I remember him in was Trading Places, and he was in the monkey outfit, the gorilla outfit on the train, and you know, I thought it was brilliant. I immediately liked him more than his brother. I mean, I was too young really to get into John Belushi all that much. James Belushi was in all kinds of stuff, movies and TV, when I was growing up. So I was a fan of him. I've always been a fan of him. So I was going to like the Mitchum brothers anyway. But eventually, we get to episode part 11, and we have that brilliant scene where they want to kill this Dougie Jones, this Douglas Jones, and they're taking him out to the desert. And Bradley is remembering his dream, and we get the cherry pie in the box. We get the money exchange. The Mitchums decide that they love Dougie Jones. And then we have this scene in the restaurant where Mrs. Jackpot shows up. The whole exchange. The fact that they're even having a conversation at this table. I mean, I love how that conversation starts, where the Mitchum brothers are like, you mean to tell me that your son doesn't have a gym set? How did they get to that point in the conversation when Dougie does nothing but repeat things? Sonny Jim set. I mean, it's just funny. That's Mark Frost right there, David Lynch, Mark Frost. They do such a good job together of these abstract, just leave it up to interpretation. And I mean, that just felt so good. The music changes, and Mrs. Jackpots has turned a corner. She's been touched by the heavenly one. And so have the Mitchum brothers. And Candy and the girls show up with the pie, and damn good pie. You know, that might be the best scene in the entire return. After Dougie gets to the desert, and the Mitchum brothers realize that he's their friend, and then it ends in the restaurant. That's some beautiful stuff right there. But it doesn't stop with the Mitchum brothers, because eventually they decide, you know, when Dougie gets in the coma, they bring the food. You know, they love this guy. This isn't something that gangsters do unless, you know, you're a made guy and they're taking care of you. And I mean, they were willing to jump up at the drop of a hat to gas up the jet and take Dougie anywhere he wanted to go. And that moment right there, I was happy that Cooper was back. He had woken up from his coma. He was barking out directions. He was being Coop. I am the FBI. He didn't do the thumbs up, and he should have. But with all of that going on, when the Mitchum brothers decided that they were flying Cooper to Twin Peaks, that was the moment of ecstasy for me. That was when, in all of this, with falling plane and all this rush of Cooper's back, I got up and high-fived my brother when the Mitchum said they were going. I wanted to see that. Once again, I'll talk about the ending in the other video that I'm going to do next. But at that point, elation. And then, they observe how Dougie isn't Dougie anymore. He's Cooper. Cooper says, you guys are the made guys now. I'm going to take care of y'all. Yeah, I'm FBI. You guys have hearts of gold. God, man, beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Probably my favorite thing about The Return. The Mitchum brothers. So there you go. Those were 10 things that I loved about Twin Peaks: The Return. I'll do a video later on about 10 things that I did not love about Twin Peaks: The Return. I hope you guys enjoyed this walk down memory lane. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos like this. I also do Dr. Ampish political videos under the Average Joe Political Show title, but Twin Perspective is going to continue to cover Twin Peaks as well as breaking down the best films of different years. We do that too. I'll probably do a video on The Final Dossier. I haven't done that yet, even though I finally listened to it and loved it. And I haven't done a 1 year later. I want my brother to be involved in that. But this has been 10 things I loved about Twin Peaks: The Return. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the trees. Bye.